This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. Warm season crops like tomatoes and green beans need consistent warmth to thrive, and it may seem like they love the heat, but when it gets too hot, some of our favorite vegetables seem to go on strike. Today, we'll learn about how the heat affects pollination and pollinators. Entomologist Laura Iles is here. She is director of the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. Hello, Laura.
Good morning, Charity.
So how common is it for plants to not get pollinated during a heat wave?
So there's kind of two problems during heat waves, and we're talking high heat, kind of over that 90, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see the problem, like, in fact, the pollen itself can become non-viable, so the high heat can affect the plant. It can also, the plant can be stressed, and it just reduces the amount of nectar there. And then for insects, that is pretty hot for them. And so over 95, you're not going to see a lot of insect activity. And you think of bumblebees that are the primary pollinator of things like tomatoes, and they're kind of round and fuzzy, and flying mussels generate a lot of body heat. And so they don't want to be active. So they'll be a lot less active during these really high heat temperature days like this.
Okay, well, I know that you are an insect person, but I do want to dig in a little bit more on what's happening with the plants. So it sounds like you're saying the pollen can basically get cooked and become inviable. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Essentially, these high temperatures are hard on plants as well. Drought, humidity. I mean, the plants, need to photosynthesize and catch up at night. When they're under stress and water stress, they're not doing what they need to do, especially to produce things like nectar is an easy thing to not have as many sugars in the nectar because that's an expense to the plant. And if the plant's stressed, it won't spend that money, essentially.
And plants don't exactly have like an on and off switch. If the temperature is 95 degrees for a day or two, does this immediately take place?
Now, I would say this is more the longer stretches, when we're seeing week and a half, a couple weeks of it, a few days, and especially if it dips cooler at night, but we're just seeing, we have quite a long stretch right now of high humidity, high temperatures.
Yes, I think we've all been feeling that for sure. Okay, well, let's talk more about the insects. As you say, it's a lot of work. None of us like to work out in this incredible heat. So are insects feeling somewhat the same way?
They do a lot. And if you've been out, 4 or 5 o'clock in the evenings after work, you notice it's kind of quieter than normal. I think everything tends to lay low a little bit. But insects, and again, it's roughly that 95 degrees threshold where we'll start to see a huge reduction in activity. And I haven't seen any, pollinator activity in the evenings in my yard at all. I do go out I went out this morning, right around 7:45 and did see one lone bumblebee at my allium. So they are out and they are getting the nectar. It's just that the time of day that they forage might change and you just might not see as many of them.
So is this a risk for the pollinators? I mean, obviously it's a less productive time for them, but does it actually put their health at risk?
I mean, this is a stressful time for them. So they're not only, having a hard time getting nectar. Some of the plants will also bloom much more briefly. They'll kind of just basically abort the flowers. I know my button bush, if it's nice weather, that'll bloom for, a week or so, with successive flowers. And this year, I mean, I was gone for the weekend and practically missed blooming. So it just bloomed so fast and gone. So it really does become kind of a tough time for them to get the nutrients they need. And, they have larvae and stuff back at a nest. So they're not only taking care of themselves, they're trying to raise young.
I think about how mammals adjust to heat like this, and we, along with other mammals, tend to be more active in the evening when it gets cooler. But that's really difficult for pollinators. I mean, they are daytime insects, right?
Right. So they can adjust sometimes a bit their activity time. And again, the evenings or the early mornings. The early mornings is a bit better because oftentimes the nectar on the plants is kind of replenished overnight. And so it's a little bit, the earliest, nectar feeder out there gets the nectar. But yeah, they'll adjust somewhat and they just during the 4 or 5 o'clock time when it's at the peak heat, you're just not going to see much activity.
Is there anything we can do to help out pollinators during a heat wave like we've been experiencing?
Yes, I put out water dishes for bees. I mean, as you know, we're supposed to stay hydrated as animals. They need to stay hydrated too. And so you can easily put out just bee water dishes. If you Google that, there's like a lot of like really cute ones. You don't need to get all fancy. I just get a plant tray that I'm not using. I went around my yard, gathered some just landscape rocks and pebbles, put them in the plant tray and just filled it up with water. And the reason why you want to do the little rocks and pebbles is so the bees can stand on it and drink and not get in the water, and just kind of set those either in, partly sunny shaded areas near where you've observed activity, any flowering plants. And that can really help them to replenish their water during times like this.
Yeah, I have dogs, and so we have outdoor water for the dogs, and I find that I'm inadvertently killing off bees because they can't climb out of there. So then that landscape is pretty important to make sure that they're not drowning, right?
Right. And people with pools and things like that frequently report, bees drowning and things like that. So having dishes and somehow so they don't drown in it's important. Also, emptying that dish completely about every 4 or 5 days. Mosquitoes are the other big complaint right now. And so you're not going to want to have, standing water in dishes for more than a week, or you're just contributing to the mosquito problem.
This is a little bit off topic, but, we have had a lot of rain this summer as well. It's been dry here for a spell. But just anecdotally, I don't find that I'm encountering as many mosquitoes as I am expecting to encounter. What do we know about populations of insects this summer?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We just had a headline earlier this week about, kind of record low mosquito numbers because we were really in a dry period. And I think that headline kind of hit here in central Iowa, right, as the floodwater mosquito populations just ballooned after the heavy rains and floods we had. And so, everyone was like, they're all in my backyard. So I thought that was pretty funny. So, different parts of the state experiencing different things. I know anyone in central Iowa is dealing a lot with mosquitoes right now.
Okay. All right. So I guess I'm lucky over in southeastern Iowa at the moment.
Yes.
It is interesting. Of course, with mosquitoes, we always do see this population boom and bust depending on moisture and the availability of standing water. When we think about other insects like pollinators, of course, we want to support the pollinators. Do the populations fluctuate as dramatically as they may with mosquitoes?
Good question. So mosquitoes, and particularly the floodwater mosquitoes, she lays her eggs near areas that will get flooded. And they will sit. And then when the flood happens, they just get this enormous population. A lot of other insects, it's like a much more slow, like a lot of the, butterflies and things, they're laying their eggs on the host plant. And so you'll see populations increase, over time. But it's not quite that amazing balloon like the mosquitoes can do.
All right. Now, a lot of people do want to support pollinators. So let's talk more about what we can do consistently, not just during a heat wave, but consistently in our yards. What do pollinators need from us?
So pollinators need flowering plants from us. And so the big thing you can do is plant flowering plants. And a lot of, pollinator gardens are really popular in an amazing way to have those flowering plants. The key really is to have something flowering throughout the whole season. Once you have pollinators nesting in your area, foraging in your area, you want to have basically a consistent buffet for them going. And so you want to watch and make sure that you always have something blooming. And that too can get tricky with, cool periods or hot periods kind of throwing off the timing of plant flowering. And so a wide variety of plants is helpful. And I also, things like bees, if you've ever, walked in the woods in the early spring, you know how much they'll forage in the understory. A lot of bees will forage in the shade. And so you should also think about those shade plants. I've noticed right now my hostas are the most beautiful flowers in my yard right now. We don't usually think of hostas for their flowers, but hostas tend to bloom over a long period of time, and you have something blooming for weeks. And so selecting plants so you have just long blooming period and then well into the fall.
When we talk about bird habitat, for example, in Iowa, there's a lot of emphasis put on planting native plants. Birds are going to do better on their native foods than if they're eating the berries from honeysuckle, for example. With pollinators, is that something we need to be thinking about, providing them with the kinds of plants that they would have encountered historically?
Yeah, so for a lot of pollinators, and some are very specific to certain plants. So I always encourage planting native flowers, but I also say nectar is nectar, pollen is pollen, and there's certainly a lot of non-native plants that you can incorporate as well. It's more important to have something consistent. And obviously the European honeybee is not native and does just fine on a lot of our native plants. So again, just having something consistently is more important than whether it's native or non-native. And again, you want to observe what bees are visiting. I encourage people to visit gardens, arboretums, look at what's flowering. Are bees visiting it? Those are great things to plant. Things like, all the cat mints and things like that out there. Just observe what bees are on and try to get some of those into your yard.
And then as humans, we often have sort of a dichotomy in our brain between the good bugs and the bad bugs. But if we want to kill off the bad bugs, we're probably going to be killing off good bugs too. So do you have some warnings about pesticide use?
Yes. And so in general, you're exactly right that insecticides don't differentiate between the good and the bad bugs. And even fungicides and herbicides have been shown through research to have, negative impacts on pollinators and, honeybees. So in general, you want to reduce pesticide use in your yard. I know this can be really hard. I mean, I too had the Japanese beetles. They were really all over my Harry Lauder's walking stick. That's not a blooming shrub. I did treat that with a conventional insecticide, but then I felt bad afterwards because, although they didn't have flowers and the bees shouldn't be visiting, there is always that possibility that a bee could, just land on it to rest and things like that. So
sometimes we just have to put up with it.
Yeah, sometimes we just have to put up with it. So it's a real balance. But again, if you're encouraging them to come to your yard, try to make a great house for them.
Entomologist Laura Iles, director of the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. This is Garden Variety. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.